Species. Unite.
Wouldn't it be amazing if you went into Nike Town and the same pair of shoes or the same style, each pair was different?
Yes.
Because it had been grown and was not the result of a plastic, a plastic polymer or an animal that had been so heavily finished that they all look the same. That, for me, would be mind-blowing, right? Where you and I could have the same handbag, but they're from the same brand, in the same shape. It's the exact same model, but the material is slightly different on every single one, like the leaves on a tree.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Novogratz. This is Species Unite. We have a favor to ask. If you like today's episode and you have a spare minute, could you please rate and review Species Unite on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts? It really helps people to find the show. This conversation is with Suzanne Lee. Suzanne is the founder and CEO of BIOFABRICATE. BIOFABRICATE is where design meets biology. They are a global network that serves the needs of bio-innovators, which are material makers, consumer brands, and investors. Suzanne is a pioneer in this space. She started growing materials from microbes for the fashion industry in 2002, and she coined the term Biocouture. She's also the author of Fashioning the Future, Tomorrow's Wardrobe. Hi, Suzanne.
Hey, Beth.
Thank you so much for meeting me here at this beautiful studio in Gowanus. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for coming all the way to Gowanus to do this.
We talk about next gen sometimes on the show, and we talk about materials, but I feel like there's so much confusion with what biomaterials are, what next gen materials are. But first, we're going to talk about you, because you've been doing it and talking about it and doing it longer than anyone I know of. So let's go to that and how all this started.
Cool. Okay, I'm glad we're talking about this, because you're right. So many people just don't understand all the nuance here, and it's very confusing. There's so much coverage of new materials, but it's not all the same thing. So it's great to break that down. Happy to help.
When did this start for you? When did this become your life and your world?
Well, firstly, my background is fashion design, fashion textiles. I'm not a scientist, so I always want to sort of stress that, because I am definitely not a kind of materials expert in that sense. But it started for me in around early 2000s. It came about because I was writing a book about the future of fashion, and I didn't want to do that in the same way that others might. I wasn't thinking about fashion in terms of what's happening next year or even next season. I was like, what's it going to look like in 50 years' time? And so I just went out and interviewed lots of scientists. I thought, you know what? The materials of tomorrow they're being developed in laboratories today. They're not being developed by fashion designers. So, how do you uncover that? And it was all really serendipitous. I just spoke to lots of scientists, and one of them was a biologist who painted a vision for me of how the future might be grown. And that just kicked the whole thing off. He blew my mind, and that was 2002. So, 22 years ago.
And when you were writing a book about it a little later, were people thinking you were a little nuts, or because no one was talking about this then?
So this is Dr. David Hepworth, and he runs a company in Scotland still called Cellucomp. He was the first person to talk to me about microbes and living organisms. The idea that we exchange back and forth was that the future of fashion will be grown. And my provocation was, could I grow a dress in a vat of liquid? And he not only said yes, but he immediately said, yeah, why don't we try it? So imagine talking about bacteria and fashion in 2002.
Yeah.
Like, all my friends in fashion were like, what are you on about? Like, the woman's lost the plot.
That's what I mean. People must have thought you were like out of your mind. And did you grow a dress?
Well, I grew lots of things, actually.
But I mean, back then with him?
Yeah. So it started off quite small. He introduced me to bacterial cellulose. And
wait, you got to explain that.
Bacterial cellulose. Okay. Well, actually, the introduction to me was through kombucha. So I guess anyone who lives in an urban center like Brooklyn is very familiar with kombucha. It's a very, it's a health drink. It has a live probiotic culture. And those microbes, when you're brewing that drink, actually what they do is the byproduct of the fermentation is that it grows a layer of material on the surface of the liquid. And normally that just gets thrown away. But that layer of material is a biofilm, and it's cellulose. It's a cellulose polymer. And cellulose polymers are the same as cotton. That's what cotton plants are made of. In fact, cellulose is the most abundant polymer on the planet. So, he was like, it's very easy to grow a material using a microbe. And then we just started exploring that particular cellulose film as a material.
And it worked.
It worked. I figured out a technique to kind of grow it, harvest it, treat it, and then cut and sew it into clothing.
Was it clothing that you could wear more than once?
I mean, absolutely. It was the first kind of revelation about that material was that it was quite leather-like. It was a sheet material for a start. It was extremely supple. It took color really well, so you could dye it any color very, very easily because it loves water. So it actually, if you're putting a dye into water, it draws that into the material. And so if it immediately became, as a designer, when you think about leather, you gravitate towards the kind of thing that you would normally make from a leather. So thinking more about like a jacket rather than a blouse, for example, so more leather-like, less cotton or silk-like.
Right.
So I was thinking more about outerwear initially, and also shoes and bags and things like that.
And with this one, with the kombucha cellulose, is that still a thing? Are people still making material with it?
Well, here's the thing, Beth. Like, when I was doing that 20 years ago and saying, this is an amazing way of producing a material, everyone was like, ew. No, that's not going to be a thing. And it was impossible to get investment for that.
That. Because you were talking about it in the past tense.
Yeah. So go back 20 years. There was no biomaterial innovation happening back then. Like, the fashion industry hadn't really woken up to sustainability in the way that it has today. And no one was really looking for alternatives to animal leather or, fossil-based materials, like plastics. And so the demand wasn't really there. And so when you went out to talk to investors, no one got it. They were like, I don't get the value proposition. Why would we want to do that? But it did get a lot of attention. People were fascinated by the idea of growing materials in that way. But basically, I spent sort of those 10 years through the sort of 2010 with one foot still in fashion, working in the industry, and then in part-time doing this crazy research. And after 10 years of just hitting my head against a brick wall because no one wanted to invest or take it forward, I kind of gave up. But 20 years later, what's exciting is that, of course, the time is now. I was just too early. So now we have probably a dozen or more companies around the world pretty much doing the same process, with refinement and looking to scale it. But now it is a thing. People are growing microbial fabrics for the fashion industry using fermentation in the way that I did back then. So that's awesome.
And is it different, though? Is it with kombucha still or other things?
that's just one type of material, right? It's the cellulose, like grown sheets. We can look at companies like Polybion and Modern Synthesis and Gozen. These are some of the companies who are doing those materials today. But then there are obviously all of these other living organisms like fungi and algae, and also plant materials, of course, where you can produce new materials. And we're only just at the beginning of that journey. Everyone is still learning what's possible in terms of growing materials.
I mean, it's a really cool time to be doing what you're doing and to be like in this and even aware of this, because I think there's this false sense of like, oh, vegan materials or non-animal materials or future materials are here and they're everywhere. And they're not in this. They are and they're not, right? They're not the materials you're talking about. They're not super scaled yet, are they?
Good. Yeah, that's a really good question. So exactly, the companies that I'm talking about that we work with in our network, they're just at that point of finalizing R&D. Everybody is working with brand partners. Most of them are kind of global names that you would recognize either from the luxury industry or from performance sport, some of the kind of premium fashion brands. But everybody's busy prototyping. We've seen a few things on the catwalk, but as yet, it's not easy to kind of go shopping on the weekend and find those products in the stores. That is gradually going to start happening. So I would say it's over the next 5 years that people are going to get exposed to some of these materials, and they're going to see and feel things that are not like plastic, and they're not like animals. It's a whole new animal.
Explain some of these, like what we're going to see and what they feel like.
I think you've covered maybe in some of your former episodes things like mycelium materials. So, the root-like structure of mushrooms. And there are many companies, who are pursuing these kind of mushroom materials. And they look very organic.
Yeah.
Which I love. These are materials that look very biological.
Yes.
They don't have a consistent color or pattern to them. And the same is true of the microbial, the bacterial cellulose materials.
I feel like one of the reasons there's resistance, or there's been not slowness, because this is actually going really fast in the big picture of life, right? But in terms of people all wanting it and waiting for it, it feels slow, I think, to brands, and it feels slow in that sense. But I thought some of the resistance, like with the mycelium, was that it wasn't perfect, right? But you're saying the fact that it's not perfect and it's organic is going to make people want it.
Well, it's a double-edged sword.
Okay.
Right. I think we have been accustomed to perfection in the form of plastics, right?
Yes.
We're now learning that perfection is not necessarily desirable. So some of these new biomaterials definitely, they're on a journey. What is exciting about them is the creative potential of the way they look and feel, which is this, and I guess that's why they're often described as a new generation, because they look and feel different, and they're from completely different origin, and they're made completely differently. The flip side to that is in material innovation, it does take time, and so where we're at right now, some of them do not yet meet the same performance specification of things like plastics, which is a crazy high bar to reach. And even animal leather, let's remember, that had the benefit of literally millennia of refinement and development over time to become this incredible material. I mean, animal leather, let's not kid ourselves, is a really high-performing, durable, beautiful material.
Right.
And to meet that bar is going to take everybody time. So some of these materials they all perform differently. That's a key thing to understand. Mycelium is extremely different to something which maybe is derived from algae, which is extremely different to something which is maybe coming from yeast or bacteria. One might be a protein material, like the collagen in your skin. Another might be a cellulose material, like, a cotton plant.
But so we would use these for totally different things then?
Exactly.
And are any in particular, like, this is the material that's going to be like the greatest shoe material instead of animal leather? Are there things kind of lining up to replace certain things, or is this a whole new world?
All of these materials need to find an end use in existing products, right? So we're still talking about finding the right application for the right material. So is it best for a shoe? Is it for, a knitted sweater?
Yeah.
Is it for, a sofa? Is it for the interior of your car? All of these end applications might want different biomaterials. And even within one type of biomaterial, if we just go with mushroom materials, there's multiple companies and each one of their materials looks and feels a bit different and they're made differently. So there's an enormous playground to kind of, operate in. What
I see, or maybe it's what I wish, is that like this is the beginning. If you look at the world 50 years from now, this is what materials are, right? Like they're all grown, they're all coming from all these like from everything that's already here, and that they can all go back into the earth at some point. And we really make a huge transition. And that right now, all these companies that you work with are kind of like the pioneers in the sense of here we go into the whole new world. Is that how you see it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think it is. I spend a lot of my time reminding people that we are at the beginning of the journey, not the end of the journey in 2024.
Right.
And you can be forgiven for thinking that it is already here and it's already out there and it's just a lifestyle choice as to whether you buy it or not. And that's misleading. And we have, unfortunately, the media have played a big role in that, right? Is that there's so many, these stories are fascinating. And so they're constantly being covered in design magazines, fashion magazines, architecture. And so you could be forgiven for thinking that, it's already here. And the reality is it's probably looking at a 50-year time frame to gradually, over time, get people to adopt these materials so that they fall in love with them, and the incumbent materials, like the ones based on fossil resources or animals, are less desirable over time. So it's going to be a gradual transition. We're not going to adopt this overnight, but we do want to start seeing these materials come in a way that excites and inspires consumers. They have to do that, otherwise it will fail.
Good point. So talk about BIOFABRICATE and how it started and what happens there.
It started because I spent that period sort of from 2000 to 2010 going to lots of science conferences, trying to educate myself about biology and biomaterials. And I used to get frustrated. I'd be like, why am I the only creative here? Like, this room is full of incredible scientists, but there are no brands. There's no one here who's thinking about the end. What could these products, what could these incredible biological systems make? So after 10 years of going to these conferences and getting frustrated, I was like, God, someone needs to do an event that brings the science together with the creatives, together with like investors and brands. And then we can start to really push this field forward. And then I got sick of waiting for someone to do it. And I was like, hell, I'm going to have to do it myself. So that was the first event. I just called the event BIOFABRICATE. I thought that was a pretty good descriptor for what we were talking about. We're fabricating with biology. So that was intended as pretty much a one-off conference in 2014, so literally 10 years ago.
You just had a summit in January in Paris. Who came to that? Like, what's the difference 10 years later?
That's a great question. Well, what's exciting, I think, is that first summit 10 years ago, the people who were on stage were all visionary sort of founders, scientists, and the brand, there was this kind of smattering of brands in the audience. In 2024, the BioFabricate Summit has moved from New York City to Paris, France, the home of the beauty and luxury fashion industry. And it was sponsored by Kering, which is one of the biggest luxury groups in the world, who have brands like Gucci, Bottega Veneta, and so on. So we've gone from being this nerdy science thing to actually a venue where the very best brands in the world are on stage talking about investing in a future where they are very excited by the future of biomaterials.
I mean, that's like in that sense too. And this is where the timeline thing for people gets all messed up. That's only 10 years ago. This was like a little nerd fest that nobody understood. And now you have the biggest brands in the world, like wanting to speak at it and paying for it and all the rest. Right. That's 10 years is nothing.
Exactly.
I mean, especially because, leather's been around for how many years and all these other things have been around for how many years. This is all brand new.
Yeah.
So congratulations for that.
Well, we've also been on a bit of a roller coaster, right? We went from that incredible, the first pioneers, everyone was super excited about all of this. Money flooded in. You literally had kind of billionaires in Silicon Valley switching from software into this kind of cell ag vision of the future. A lot of money got pumped in. People got high valuation. But then the product was struggling to scale. Right. And everybody started to become much more realistic about the timeline for how long this was going to take. So then I think we came down to earth and we started to kind of think not all of these technologies maybe are right for things like for food or materials. So then it starts to become a little more realistic about what's possible.
And how long it's going to take and what scaling looks like. Scaling's a whole different beast.
Yeah. And I think that there was a lot of naivety in the beginning where people were thinking they could reinvent the wheel. It was like, we're just going to come up with this whole new system and then we'll get everybody to bend towards the way we see it. And I think that as people have become more mature and understood existing infrastructure and supply chains and the complexity of all of that, people are now saying, I actually need this to be a drop-in for an existing process because no one's going to change their whole production line to kind of, fit around us.
Right.
So I think that's some of the maturing that's happened in the last 10 years as well. So we're in a place now where people are more realistic about how they're going to achieve that scale.
Which also I would think would take a lot of the stress off in the sense of everybody wanted it here, now, bigger, better, faster. And now that everyone's in reality, including investors, even though a lot have run away. But the ones that haven't run away are the ones that are in reality.
Well, the ones that ran away should never have been there in the first place. And the ones who are coming in now should have been.
Yes.
But it took the other guys to kind of convince them that there is a there, right? So, we were talking about this last week, and I think that if you go back 10 years, the first investors to come in actually came out of software. There were people who made a lot of money, but there was kind of no one there from the fashion industry, for example, from the textile supply chain or the leather industry. None of them were involved back then. But what's happened is the ones who were expecting a quick return on investment, like the software guys who are just like, just make a minimum viable product and then we'll just perfect it from there, which is what you do with software and, beta testing.
Sure.
You can't beta test a handbag. It's either working or it isn't. So the investors who are in this now are much smarter. They're much more knowledgeable. They have access to the right, manufacturing resources, and they have a sense of they have the kind of skill set to collaborate with those innovators. So
they're actually helpful.
They're actually helpful.
Yeah. So talk about this year's summit. What innovators were there?
Well, first of all, so the summit's just one of the things we do.
Yeah.
We're kind of first and foremost a consultancy. So we work with startups, biomaterial startups, investors and brands. That is absolutely the core. And so we're very, very niche. as an agency. So most of the year we're working with that group of people toiling away in the background, really. And then the summit is the kind of outward facing, kind of showcase, really. BioFabricate exists to drive our material world grown with biology. One of the roles that BioFabricate plays is at the interface between a startup and the brand, because the brand kind of they know existing materials.
Yeah.
So their point of reference is either like animal leather or plastics or, cotton or polyester or whatever it is they're using. It's quite hard for them to understand, actually, there's a new beast in the room and it's not the same as anything that you've worked with before. And the startups, on the other hand, most of the people who founded those companies or work in these companies actually haven't worked in those industries. They don't come from fashion textiles or leather. And so they don't understand necessarily how to communicate the challenges of the innovation to the brands. And so we've sat both sides of the fence at BioFabricate. I've been in-house at startups, I've innovated materials, but I've also come out of the fashion textile industry. So I feel the pain on both sides. I feel the innovator's pain very, very deeply, because there's nothing easy about innovating these materials. Yeah. It's a slog, and startups is a lot of hard work. These are very, very hardworking people. But on the brand side too, I get the pressure, that you have on your sales figures, and, you've got to delight the customer. You've got to be constantly coming up with something new. And there's a real pressure there too. You don't have time to worry about, does it work or does it not? I just need it. I need it to look and feel interesting. You need to deliver it on time at the right price or lower than what I'm currently paying. So right. There's a real tension there. And BioFabricate can come in and actually sort of help these two parties work better together.
In terms of where these innovators are now versus when you did the first summit 10 years ago, being at the summit and seeing people talking about what they're doing and showing their materials, is it a totally different world to see where everybody's come in the last 10 years?
Yeah, 2014, we had a small room with a few tables showcasing samples that were very often either in a little petri dish or in a test tube, or they were very scrappy. Yeah. They were the germ of an idea more than...
I saw some of those back in the day.
Yeah, so it was super early stages, but you could sense what might be possible. 2024, we had 60 innovators showing materials that in some instances come on a roll, several meters long. There are handbags, shoes, chairs, jackets, coats from Balenciaga, a real breadth of prototypes and things that have been on the market already, and they're all gathered in that one space, along with increasingly beauty products as well. So we're also interested in companies who are thinking about things like dyes and pigments and sequins that are not made from plastic, So lots of other things that also come together, which are going to have an impact in fashion, and some of the finishes that go on, which traditionally would be from a petrochemical, but actually could be biological instead.
How do you do a finish biologically?
Well, we're thinking about companies who are trying to find bio-based alternatives to polyurethane.
Right.
For example.
So the top coat on certain
exactly, the top coat, which, by the way, is also on animal leather.
Yeah. A car seat is thick plastic.
Yeah.
On top of the leather.
Yeah, exactly. So that is also a big challenge that BioFabricate is also playing a role, sort of a leadership role around design. One of the key themes for the summit, and especially for this year and our next summit, is around how do we design with biology in a way that embraces the biology, that lets biology inform the product instead of us trying to mimic what we already have. It's insanity to put a calf grain on a mushroom material. Why are we doing that?
I totally agree. Why can't we do new?
Yeah. when the mushroom material actually has its own look and feel. Same with actually Gani are doing handbags with Polybion, a Mexican startup, which is a bacterial cellulose. And they fully embrace the look and the feel of the actual material. So it looks biological, but it doesn't look like an animal and it doesn't look like a plant. It's just kind of wondrous. It's got a whole new look to it.
That is so cool.
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
like that's what fashion gets excited about. And that's what we get excited about. So we want to get people to be more creative with these materials and stop trying to, force fit them into these existing.
Well, that's probably one of the reasons it's so hard for so many of these guys to scale, because if you're trying to make like, oh, we're going to make the exact same thing, just no animal and no plastic, like you're just stuck in a hole for a very long time trying to copy something. And also with the animal, because it's been going on for so long, it's perfect.
You can't beat them.
Right? And every pair of shoes looks the exact same.
Right.
And every jacket looks the exact same.
But that's the opportunity right there.
Right.
Wouldn't it be amazing if you went into Nike Town and the same pair of shoes or the same style, each pair was different?
Yes.
Because it had been grown and was not the result of a plastic polymer or an animal that had been so heavily finished that they all look the same. That, for me, would be mind-blowing, right? Where you and I could have the same handbag, but they're from the same brand, in the same shape. It's the exact same model, but the material is slightly different on every single one, like the leaves on a tree.
But wouldn't that be so much better?
Yeah. I mean, for me,
right?
I'm
like none are the exact same. Isn't that what we love in the world? Like
right.
no snowflake, no human,
right.
no fingerprint. Right? Like it's such a cooler way to live.
But why are we not embracing that right now? So that's our mission, right? We're passionate.
I never thought about that, and that is amazing. So I know you're Switzerland. So I don't know if you're allowed to pick favorites, but do you have like certain like innovators and companies that you're really excited about getting out there?
Obviously, I have a personal passion for the people who are brewing materials that are microbial and the cellulose ones, right? So people like Polybion, Modern Synthesis, Gozen, for sure. Some of those, what they're doing, I love to see, because that feels like the continuation of the work that I started.
Yes.
But now is the right time, and I love the way they're embracing it. I also love the mycelium materials, and I love the companies who are, again, pushing on brands to redefine these materials to see where they could go. MycoWorks, Skim, and Ecovative.
Yeah. I was at Ecovative's factory not too long ago. I had no idea what I was going to see. It was a really cool day. I had no idea that we were going to go see like mycelium everywhere. It is unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, Ecovative just laid the ground for so many people who came behind them. I remember when it was packaging, then they were looking at construction materials, then it was leather alternatives, then it was foams, then it was food. Like, it's been a powerhouse of kind of, brainstorming and testing all
and experimentation
of
and not being afraid of anything.
Yeah.
There was a chef there who made us some of the bacon, which I actually have at my house now because it's amazing. You're eating mycelium and it's really, really good.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope everybody succeeds. I think for us, there's so much, literally blood, sweat and tears have gone into so many of these companies in the last 10 years, and everyone deserves to win. And there's room for everyone, to be honest, right? Like, everyone's kind of carving their own niche for what their materials or their technology can do. I can't wait for the next 5 to 10 years, because so much more will be out in the world, and it will start to change, our perception of materials. Biology is going to do that.
I think we talked about this when we talked a couple weeks ago. I do think this first wave we had of kind of high plastic vegan materials that were not so great for the planet for sure, but it did shift mindset in the sense that people didn't stop being so like attached to animal materials. I'm not saying it was good for the planet, it wasn't. but at least it started creating that, like, people that were willing to experiment and try other things. And 10 years ago, if I told somebody I was wearing shoes that were vegan, they would have like scoffed at me. And now people are like, where'd you get those? And it's a very different mindset. So with this whole world of materials that are actually good for the world, I can't imagine that there's going to be any resistance.
I think you're absolutely right. It's like the gateway. It was like the gateway drug. Yeah. It did. It opened the door to a much better place in terms of everybody is very of the opinion that we don't want hybrids. We don't want a mix of, polyurethane and some biomass or some bio content. That's the dream of this, is that we can get to materials which are 100% biological and they still perform and they still reach the right aesthetic and they can compete on price. That's the holy grail. And we just need to walk towards that. So it's going to take some time. But I think it's moving really fast. Even a couple of years ago, at one of our biofabricates, it was that moment in time where the innovators were trying to persuade brands to adopt this material instead of their normal calf leather. And so the brands were asking everybody to do a black calf grain because it's the most popular, by far, that's where the sales are. And so we had all of these materials on display and they all look like black calf grain. And we were like, this is crazy. There's no variability here. Everyone's trying to force it into what they already know. 2 years later, at this Biofabricate, people have broken away from that. And again, just the beginning, but people are now thinking, yeah, we need to stop trying to mimic what we have and let's move towards what it could be, that it's uncovering its true nature. So, it is moving fast.
Do you feel like that is maybe the key to opening all this up? Hey, we don't have to mimic. Like now it's like this, the world's open.
It is, absolutely. And it's the beginning of a conversation. And I think what drives it forward is when you can point to examples. I have a couple of handbags sitting in our office right now from Ganni, the Scandinavian brand. And they're next-gen materials that look super organic, super biological. I really hope they come to market with those ones because they're prototypes right now. But it's just going to be such a topic of conversation in fashion. It just doesn't look like anything you've ever seen before. And that's as it should be.
Well, and it's such a great idea, too. It's actually such a good marketing thing. Like in the same way, no leaves are the same. That's how fashion should become.
Right.
And people really own their own pieces.
Yeah.
I love that. I love it. That is awesome. So let's talk about polyester.
It's like 60% or something of all the fibers that we use in the fashion industry. It's by far the biggest. It's mostly coming from virgin fossil fuels. We're addicted to it. It's cheap, it's abundant, it's in almost everything.
And so how do we get rid of it and replace it?
Well, I mean, that's what a lot of people are working on right now. You've got other companies who are using biology to make the precursors to things like polyester in a way that could be affordable as well. Lanzatech is one of them that's doing that. Keel is another one. They're looking at algae. Can we use seaweed and then blending it with things like cotton, but like 80% seaweed to make a beautiful yarn that comes from the sea and could completely just degrade in the sea in a way that polyester fibers do not, right? So that is a new generation of biomaterial innovators who are also thinking not just about leather materials, but petrochemical or animal materials that could come from other sources.
It's really cool to be talking to you because you've been in it seriously since the beginning, but who know it's coming and see it and are in it. And the rest of the world's just all of a sudden going to be wearing seaweed, and not really even noticing the shift, most people.
No. I think that's the only challenging part is convincing people to talk about it, right? Because I think some of the brands are a bit scared to communicate. Maybe they feel it's too complicated to explain what this is.
Right.
I think there's a big opportunity in marketing.
Yes.
To help these innovators and brands with the storytelling around this. How do you communicate this in a way which is accessible? Because we don't want to hear this. We don't want to hear the technical aspects of the science. That's not the sexy bit in a way. No. You can't be nerdy about it. You have to find a language that inspires and excites people. And I'm not sure that we've seen it yet. But I think that's a big marketing and branding opportunity for someone that has that skill
I think
set.
so too.
Figuring out incredible ways to inspire through storytelling.
Suzanne, this is awesome. I love what you're doing. And I'm very excited about these innovators.
Thank you so much for inviting me and for continuing to expose your audience to some of these innovations. This is exactly what we need.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing that.
To learn more about Suzanne, to learn about BioFabricate, go to our website, speciesunite.com. We will have links to everything. We're on Facebook and Instagram at SpeciesUnite. If you have a spare moment and could do us a favor, please subscribe, rate, review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps people find the show. If you'd like to support the podcast, we would greatly appreciate it. Go to our website, speciesunite.com, and click donate. I would like to thank everyone at Species Unite, including Gary Knudsen, Caitlin Pierce, Amy Jones, Paul Healy, Santina Polke, Sam Kosel, and Anna Kolner, who wrote and performed today's music. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.